and being beaten. We have to do something about that man, Cerelia said, meeting Cadswain's eyes. He has grown worse since we last met. He has, Cadswain said. He's surprisingly accomplished at ignoring my training. Then let us discuss, Cerelia said, pulling over a stool. A plan must be arranged, for the good of all. For the good of all, Cadswain agreed. Althor himself most of all.
Chapter 15. A Place to Begin. Rand woke on the floor of a hallway. He sat up, listening to the distant sound of water. The stream outside the manor house? No, that was wrong. The walls and floor here were stone, not wood. No candles or lamps hung from the stonework, and yet there was light, ambient in the air. He stood, then straightened his red coat, feeling strangely unafraid. He recognized this place from somewhere, distant in his memory. How had he come here? The recent past was clouded and seemed to slip from him like fading trails of mist. No, he thought firmly. His memories obeyed, snapping back into place before the strength of his determination. He had been in the Dumani Manor House, awaiting a report from Rourke about the capture of the first few members of the Merchant Council. Men had been reading Each Castle, a biography, in the deep green chair of the room they shared. Rand had been exhausted, as he often was lately. He'd gone to lie down. He was asleep then. Was this the world of dreams? Though he had visited it on occasion, he knew very few specifics. Egwene and the Aiel Dreamwalkers spoke of it only guardedly. This place felt different from the dream world, and oddly familiar. He looked down the hallway. It was so long that it vanished into shadows, walls broken by doors at intervals, the wood dry and cracked. Yes, he thought, seizing at a memory. I have been here before, but not in a long time. He chose one of the doors at random. He knew that it wouldn't matter which one he picked, and pushed it open. There was a room beyond of modest size. The far side was a series of gray stone arches. Beyond them, a little courtyard and a sky of burning red clouds. The clouds grew and sprang from one another like bubbles in boiling water. They were the clouds of an impending storm, unnatural though they were. He looked more closely and saw that each new cloud formed the shape of a tormented face, the mouth open in a silent scream. The cloud could swell, expanding upon itself, face distorting, jaw working, cheeks twisting, eyes bulging. Then it would split, other faces swell. In time. There was no ground beyond the courtyard, just that terrible sky. Rand did not want to look toward the left side of the room. The fireplace was there. The stones that formed floor, hearth, and columns were warped, as if they had been melted by an extreme heat. At the edges of his vision, they seemed to shift and change. The angle
angles and proportions of the room were wrong, just as they had been when he'd come here long ago. Something was different this time, however. Something about the colors. Many of the stones were black, as if they'd been burned, and cracks laced them. Distant red light glowed from within, as if they had cores of molten lava. There had once been a table here, hadn't there? Polished and of fine wood, its ordinary lines a discomforting contrast to the distorted angles of the stones. The table was gone. But 2 chairs sat before the fireplace, high-backed and facing the flames, obscuring whomever might be sitting in them. Rand forced himself to walk forward, his boots clicking on stones that burned. He felt no heat, either from them or the fire. His breath caught and his heart pounded as he approached those chairs. He feared what he would find. He rounded them. A man sat in the chair on the left. Tall and youthful, he had a square face and ancient blue eyes that reflected the hearth fire, turning his irises almost purple. The other chair was empty. Rand walked to it and sat down, calming his heart and watching the dancing flames. He had seen this man before in visions, not unlike the ones that appeared when he thought of Matt or Perrin. The colors did not appear on this thought of his friends. That was odd, but somehow not unexpected. The visions he'd seen of the man in the other chair were different from the ones involving Perrin and Matt. They were more visceral somehow, more real. At times, during those visions, Rand had felt almost as if he could reach out and touch this man. He'd been afraid of what would happen if he did. He had met the man only once, at Shadar Logoth. The stranger had saved Rand's life, and Rand had often wondered who he had been. Now in this place, Rand finally knew. "You are dead," Rand whispered. "I killed you." The man didn't look from the fire as he laughed. It was a rough, low-throated laugh that held little true mirth. Once Rand had known this man only as Baalzamon, a name for the Dark One, and had foolishly thought that in killing him, he had defeated the Shadow for good. "I watched you die," Rand said. "I stabbed you through the chest with Kalandor, Isha." "That is not my name," the man interrupted, still watching the flames. "I am known as Moradin now." "The name is irrelevant," Rand said angrily. "You are dead, and this is just a dream." "Just a dream," Moradin said, chuckling. "Yes." The man was clad in a black coat and trousers, the darkness relieved only by red embroidery on the sleeves. Moradin finally looked at him. Flames from the fire cast bright red and orange light across his angular face and unblinking eyes. "Why do you always whine that way? Just a dream. Do you not know that many dreams are more truthful than the waking world?" "You are dead," Rand repeated stubbornly. "So are you. I watched you die, you know. Lashing out in a tempest, creating an entire mountain to mark your cairn. So arrogant." Lews Therin had, upon discovering that he'd killed all that he loved, drawn upon the One Power and destroyed himself, creating Dragonmount in the process. Mention of this event always brought on howls of grief and anger in Rand's mind. But this time there was silence. Moradin turned back to watch the heatless flames. To the side, in the stones of the fireplace, Rand saw movement, flickering bits of shadow, just barely visible through the cracks in the stones. The red-hot heat shone behind, like rock turned molten, and these shadows moved, frantic. Just faintly, Rand could hear scratching. Rats, he realized. There were rats behind the stones, being consumed by the terrible heat trapped on the other side. Their claws scratched, pushing through the cracks as they tried to escape their burning. Some of those tiny hands seemed almost human. "Just a dream," Rand told told himself forcefully. Just a dream. But he knew the truth of what Moradin had said. Rand's enemy still lived. Light. How many of the others had returned as well? Anger made him grip the armrest of the chair. Perhaps he should have been terrified, but he had stopped running from this creature and his master long ago. Rand had no room left for fear. In fact, it should be Moradin who feared. For the last time they had met, Rand had killed him. How? Rand demanded. Long ago, I promised you that the Great Lord could restore your lost love. Do you not think that he can easily recover one who serves him? Another name for the Dark One was Lord of the Grave. Yes, it was true, even if Rand wished he could deny it. Why should he be surprised to see his enemies return when the Dark One could restore the dead to life? We are all reborn, Moradin continued, spun back into the pattern time and time again. Death is no barrier to my master, save for those who have known balefire. They are beyond his grasp. It is a wonder we can remember them. Some of the others really were dead. Balefire was the key. But how had Moradin gotten into Rand's dreams? Rand set wards each night. He glanced at Moradin, noticing something odd about the man's eyes. Small black flecks floated about in the whites, crossing back and forth like bits of ash blown on a leisurely wind. The Great Lord can grant insanity, you know, Moradin said. Your last gift of sanity brought me no comfort, Rand said, surprising himself with the words. That had been Lews Therin's memory, not his own. Yet Lews Therin was gone from his mind. Oddly, Rand felt more stable somehow, here in this place where all else appeared fluid. The pieces of him fit together better. Not perfectly, of course, but better than they had in recent memory. Moradin snorted softly, but said nothing. Rand turned back to the flames, watching them twist and flicker. They formed shapes, like the clouds, but these were headless bodies, skeletal, backs arching in pain, writhing for a moment in fire, spasming before flashing into nothing. Rand watched that fire for a time, thinking. One might have thought that they were two old friends enjoying the warmth of a winter hearth, except that the flames gave no heat, and Rand would someday kill this man again, or die at his hands. Moradin tapped his fingers on the chair. Why have you come here? Come here, Rand thought with shock. Hadn't Moradin brought him? I feel so tired, Moradin continued, closing his eyes. Is that you, or is it me? I could throttle Semirog for what she did. Rand frowned. Was Moradin mad? Ishamael had certainly seemed crazy at the end. It is not time for us to fight, Moradin said, waving a hand at Rand. Go. Leave me in peace. I do not know what would happen to us if we killed one another. The Great Lord will have you soon enough. His victory is assured. He has failed before and will fail again, Rand said. I will defeat him. Moradin laughed again, the same heartless laugh as before. Perhaps you will, he said. But do you think that matters? Consider it. The wheel turns time and time again. Over and over the age and men fight the Great Lord. But someday he will win, and when he does, the wheel will stop. That is why his victory is assured. I think it will be this age, but if not, then in another. When you are victorious, it only leads to another battle. When he is victorious, all all things will end. Can you not see that there is no hope for you? Is that what made you turn to his side? Rand asked. You were always so full of thoughts, Adon. Your logic destroyed you, didn't it? There is no path to victory, Moradin said. The only path is to follow the great lord and rule for a time before all things end. The others are fools. They look for grand rewards in the eternities. But there will be no eternities. Only the now. The last days. He laughed again, and this time there was joy in it. True pleasure. Rand stood. Moradin eyed him warily, but did not get up. There is a way to win, Moradin, Rand said. I mean to kill him. Slay the Dark One. Let the wheel turn without his constant taint. Moradin gave no reaction. He was still staring at the flames. We are connected, Moradin finally said. That is how you came here, I suspect. Though I do not understand our bond myself. I doubt you can understand the magnitude of the stupidity in your statement. Rand felt a flash of anger, but fought it down. He would not be goaded. We shall see. He reached for the one power. It was distant, far away. Rand seized it and felt himself yanked away as if on a line of iodine. The room vanished, and so did the one power, as Rand entered a deep blackness.
Rand finally stopped thrashing in his sleep, and Min held her breath, hoping that he wouldn't start again. She sat, legs tucked underneath her, wrapped in a blanket as she read in her chair at the corner of the room. A small lamp flickered and danced on the short table beside her, illuminating her stack of musty books. Falling shale, marks and remarks, monuments past, histories, most of them. Rand sighed softly but did not move. Min released her breath and settled back into her chair, finger marking her place in a copy of Pelateos's Ponderings. With the shutters closed for the night, she could still hear the wind sough in the pines. The room smelled faintly of smoke from the strange fire. Avienda's quick thinking had made a potential disaster into a mere inconvenience. Not that she was being rewarded for it. The wise ones continued to work her as hard as a merchant's last mule. Min hadn't been able to get close enough to her to have a conversation, despite the fact that they'd been in the camp together for some time now. She didn't know how to think of the other woman. They had become a little more comfortable with one another that evening, sharing usquai. But one day did not friends make, and she was definitely uncomfortable about sharing. Min glanced again at Rand, lying on his back, eyes closed, breath coming evenly now. His left arm lay across his blankets, the stump exposed. She didn't know how he managed to sleep with those wounds in his side. As soon as she thought of them, she could feel the pain. It was all part of the rolled-up ball of Rand's emotions in the back of her mind. She had learned to ignore the pain. She'd had to. For him, it would be much, much stronger. How he could stand it, she didn't know. She wasn't Aes Sedai, thank the light, but somehow she had bonded him. It was amazing. She could tell where he was, tell if he was distraught. She could mostly keep his emotions from overwhelming her, except when they were passionate. But what woman didn't want to be overwhelmed during those moments? It was a particularly exhilarating experience with the bond, which let her feel both her own desire and the raging tempest of fire that was Rand's desire for her. The thought made her blush, and she pulled open Ponderings to distract herself. Rand needed his sleep, and she was going to let him have it. Besides, she needed to study, although she was confronted by conclusions that she didn't like. These books had belonged to Herod Fell, the kindly old scholar who had joined Rand's school in Kyrian. Min smiled, remembering Fell's distracted way of talking and his confused, yet somehow brilliant, discoveries. Herod Fell was dead now, murdered, torn apart by shadow spawn. He'd discovered something in these books, something he'd intended to tell Rand, something about the last battle and the seals on the Dark One's prison. Fel had been killed just before he could pass on the information. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps the books had nothing to do with his death. But perhaps they did. Min was determined to find the answers, for Rand and for Herod himself. She put down Ponderings and picked up Thoughts Among the Ruins, a work from over 1,000 years ago. She'd marked a place with a small slip of paper, the very same now worn note that Herod had sent to Rand shortly before the murder. Min turned it over in her fingers, reading it again. Belief and order give strength. Have to clear rubble before you can build. Will explain when see you next. Do not bring girl. Too pretty. She figured, from reading among his books, that she could trace his thoughts. Rand had wanted information on how to seal the Dark One's prison. Could Fel have discovered what she thought he had? She shook her head. What was she doing trying to solve a scholarly mystery? But who else was there? One of the brown Ajah might be better suited, but could they be trusted? Even those who had made their oaths to him might decide that it was in Rand's best interests to keep secrets from him. Rand himself was far too busy, and he was too impatient for books lately anyway. That left Min. She was beginning to piece together some of what he would have to do, but there was more, so much more, that was still unknown. She felt she was getting close, but it worried her to reveal what she'd discovered to Rand. How would he respond? She sighed, scanning the book. She'd never thought that she, of all people, would become a fool for some man. Yet here she was, following him wherever he went, putting his needs before her own. That didn't mean she was his pet, regardless what some of the people in camp said. She followed Rand because she loved him, and she could feel, literally, that he returned her love. Despite the harshness that was invading him bit by bit, despite the anger and the bleakness of his life, he loved her, and so she did what she could to help him. If she could help solve this one puzzle, the puzzle of sealing the Dark One's prison, she could achieve something not just for Rand, but for the world itself. What did it matter if soldiers in the camp didn't know what her value was? It was probably better if everyone assumed her to be dismissible. Any assassin who came to kill Rand should think that he could ignore Min. The would-be killer would soon discover the knives hidden in Min's sleeves. She wasn't as good with them as Tom Marilyn was, but she knew more than enough to kill. Rand turned in his sleep, but settled down again. She loved him. She hadn't chosen to do so, but her heart, or the pattern, or the creator, or whatever was in charge of these things, had made the decision for her, and now she wouldn't change her feelings if she could. If it meant danger, if it meant suffering the looks of men in the camp, if it meant sharing him with others. Rand stirred again. This time he groaned and opened his eyes, sitting up. He raised his hand to his head, somehow managing to look more weary now than he had when he'd gone to sleep. He wore only his small clothes, and his chest was bare. He sat like that for a long moment, then stood up, walking to the shuttered window. Min pushed her book closed. And what do you think you're doing, sheep herder? You barely slept for a couple of hours. He opened the shutters and the window, exposing the dark night beyond. A stray curl of wind made her lamp flame shiver. Rand? Min asked. She could barely hear his voice when he replied. He's inside my head. He was gone during the dream, but he's back now. She resisted sinking down in her chair. Liked, but she hated hearing about Rand's madness. She'd hoped that when he healed Saidin, he would be free of the taint's insanities. She asked, forcing her voice to be steady. The voice of Lews Theron? He turned, clouded night sky outside the window framing his face, the lamp's uneven illumination leaving his features mostly in shadows. Rand, she said, setting her book aside and joining him beside the window. You have to talk to someone. You can't keep it all inside. I have to be strong. She tugged on his arm, turning him toward her. Keeping me away means you're strong. I'm not. Yes, you are. There are things going on in there, behind those Aiel eyes of yours. Rand, do you think I will stop loving you because of what you hear? You'll be frightened. Oh, she said, folding her arms. So I'm a fragile flower, am I? He opened his mouth, struggling for words, in the way he once had, back when he'd been nothing more than a sheep herder on an adventure. Then I know you're strong. You know I do. Then trust me to be strong enough to bear what is inside you, she said. We can't just pretend nothing has happened. She forced herself onward. The taint left marks on you. I know it did. But if you can't share it with me, who can you share it with? He ran his hand through his hair, then turned away, beginning to pace. Burn it all, men! If my enemies discover my weaknesses, they will exploit them. I feel blind. I'm running in the dark on an unfamiliar path. I don't know if there are breaks in the road or if the whole cursed thing ends in a cliff. She laid a hand on his arm as he passed, stopping him. Tell me. You'll think I'm mad. She snorted. I already think you're a wool-headed fool. Can it be much worse than that? He regarded her, and some of the tension left his face. He sat down on the edge of the bed, sighing softly. But it was progress. Tell me what's right, Rand said. I hear things. The voice of Luz Theron, the dragon. He speaks to me and responds to the world around me. Sometimes he tries to seize Sidene from me, and sometimes he succeeds. He's wild, men. Insane. But the things he can do with the One Power are amazing. He stared off into the distance. Min shivered. Light. He let the voice in his head wield the One Power? What did that mean? That he let the mad part of his brain take control? He shook his head. Senerog claims that this is just insanity, tricks of my mind. But Luz Theron knows things that I don't. Things about history, about the One Power. You had a viewing of me that showed two people merging into one. That means that Luz Theron and I are distinct. Two people, men. He's real. She walked over and sat next to him. Rand, he's you, or you're him. Fall out into the pattern again. Those memories and things you can do that remnants from who you were before. No, Rand said. Min, he's insane and I'm not. Besides, he failed. I won't do it, Min. I won't hurt those I love as he did. And when I defeat the Dark One, I won't leave him able to return a short time later and terrorize us again. 3,000 years, a short time later? She put her arms around him. Does it matter? She asked. If there is another person, or if those are just memories from before, the information is useful. Yes, Rand said, seeming distant again. But I'm afraid to use the One Power. When I do, I risk letting him take control. He can't be trusted. He didn't mean to kill her, but that doesn't change the fact that he did. Light. Ilyena. Was this how it happened to all of them? Each one assuming that they were really sane, and that it was the other person inside of them who did horrible things? It's done now, Rand, she said, holding him close. Whatever this voice is, it won't grow any worse. Sidene is cleansed. Rand didn't respond, but he did relax. She closed her eyes, enjoying the feeling of his warmth beside her, particularly since he'd left the window open. Ishamael lives, Rand said. She snapped her eyes open. What? Just when she was beginning to feel comfortable. I visited him in the world of dreams, Rand said. And before you ask, no, it wasn't just a nightmare, and it wasn't madness. It was real, and I can't explain how I know. You will just have to trust me. Ishamael, she whispered. You killed him. Yes, Rand said. In the Stone of Tyr. He has returned, bearing a new face and a new name, but it is him. We should have realized it would happen. The Dark One won't abandon such useful tools without a fight. He can reach beyond the grave. Then how can we win? If everyone we kill just comes back again, balefire, Rand said. It will kill them for good. Cadswain said, I don't care what Cadswain said, he snarled. She is my advisor, and she gives advice, only advice. I am the Dragon Reborn, and I will decide how we fight. He stopped, taking a deep breath. Anyway, it doesn't matter if the Forsaken return. It doesn't matter who or what the Dark One sends at us. In the end, I will destroy him, if possible. If not, then I will at least seal him away so tightly that the world can forget him. He glanced down at her. For that, I need the voice, man. Lews Therin knows things, or I know things. Whichever it is, the knowledge is there. In a way, the Dark One's own taint will destroy him, for it is what gave me access to Lews Therin. Min glanced at her books. Herod's little slip of paper still peeked from the depths of Thoughts Among the Ruins. Rand, she said, you have to destroy the seals to the Dark One's prison. He looked at her, frowning. I'm sure of it, she said. I've been reading Herod's books all this time, and I believe that's what he meant by clearing away the rubble. In order to rebuild the Dark One's prison, you will first need to open it. Clear away the patch made on the bore. She had expected him to be incredulous. Shockingly, he just nodded. Yes, he said. Yes, that sounds right. I doubt that many will wish to hear it. If those seals are broken, there is no way to tell what will happen. If I fail to contain him... The prophecies didn't say Rand would win, only that he would fight. Min shivered again, blasted window, but met Rand's gaze. You'll win. You'll defeat him. He sighed. Faith in a madman, Min? Faith in you, sheep herder. Suddenly viewings spun around his head. She ignored them most of the time unless they were new, but now she picked them out. Fireflies consumed in darkness. 3 women before a pyre. Flashes of light, darkness, shadow. Signs of death. Crowns, injuries, pain, and hope. A tempest around Randall Thor, stronger than any physical storm. We still don't know what to do, he said. The seals are brittle enough that I could break them in my hands, but what then? How do I stop him? Does it say anything of that in your books? It's hard to tell, she admitted. The clues, if that's what they are vague. I will keep looking. I promise. I'll find answers for you. He nodded, and she was surprised to feel his trust through the bond. That was a frighteningly rare emotion from him recently, but he did seem softer than he had during previous days. Still stone, but perhaps with some few cracks, willing to let her inside. It was a beginning. She tightened her arms around him and closed her eyes again. A place to begin, but with so little time left, it would have to do. Carefully shielding her burning candle, Avienda lit the pole-mounted lantern. It flickered a light, illuminating the green around her. Slumbering soldiers snored in rows of tents. The evening was cold, the air crisp, and branches rattled in the distance. A lonely owl hooted, and Avienda was exhausted. She'd crossed the grounds 50 times, lighting the lantern, blowing it out, then jogging back across the green and lighting her candle at the manor before walking carefully, shielding the flame, to light the lantern again. Another month of these punishments, and she'd probably go as mad as a wetlander. The wise ones would wake one morning and find her going for a swim, or carrying a half-full water skin, or even riding a horse for pleasure. She sighed, too exhausted to think any further, and turned toward the Aiel section of camp to finally sleep. Someone was standing behind her. She started, hand going to her dagger, but relaxed as she recognized Amis. Of all the wise ones, only she, a former maiden, could have sneaked up on Avienda. The wise one stood with hands clasped before her, brown shawl and skirt flapping slightly in the wind. Avienda's skin prickled at the particularly chilly gust. Amis's silver hair seemed almost ghostly in the evening light. A pine needle passing on the breeze had gotten lodged in it. "You approach your punishments with such dedication, child," Amis said. Avienda looked down. Pointing out her activities was to shame her. Was she running out of time? Had the Wise Ones finally decided to give up on her? "Please, Wise One, I only do as duty demands." "Yes, you do," Amis said. She reached up, running her hand through her hair, and found the pine needle, then let it drop to the dead grass. "And also, you do not. Sometimes, Avienda, we are so concerned with the things we have done that we do not stop to consider the things we have not." Avienda was glad for the darkness, which hid her shameful blush. In the distance, a soldier rang the evening bell to chime the hour, the soft metal ringing with 11 melancholy peals. How did she respond to Amis's comments? There didn't seem to be any proper response. Avienda was saved by a flash of light just beyond the camp. It was faint, but in the darkness the flicker was easy to notice. "What?" the Wise One asked, noticing Avienda's gaze and turning to follow it. "Light," Avienda said. "From the traveling grounds." Amis frowned, then the two of them moved toward the grounds. Soon they encountered Dahmer Flynn, Davram Bashir, a small guard of Saldeans and Aiel walking into the camp. What did one think of a creature such as Flynn? The taint had been cleansed, but this man, and many of the others, had come asking to learn before that had happened. Avienda herself would have sooner embraced Sightblinder himself as done that, but they had proven to be powerful weapons. Amis and Avienda moved to the side as the small party hurried toward the manor house, lit only by the distant flickering torches and the cloud-covered sky above. Though most of the force sent to meet the Shanshan had been made up of Bashir's soldiers, there were several maidens in the group. Amis locked eyes with one of them, an older woman named Korana. She hung back, and though it was difficult to tell in the darkness, she looked concerned, perhaps angry. "What news?" Amis asked. "The invaders, these Shanshan." Korana nearly spat the word. "They have agreed to another meeting with the Karakarn." Amis nodded. Korana, however, sniffed audibly, short hair ruffling in the chill breeze. "Speak," Amis said. "The Karakarn sues too hard for peace," Korana replied. "These Shanshan have given him reason to declare a blood feud, but he simpers and panders to them. I feel like a trained dog sent to lick the feet of a stranger." Amis glanced at Avienda. "What do you say to this, Avienda?" "My heart agrees with her words, Wise One. But while the Karakarn is a fool in some things, he is not being one now. My mind agrees with him, and in this case it is the mind I would follow." "How can you say that?" Korana snapped. She emphasized the you, as if to imply that Avienda, recently a maiden, should understand. "Which is more important, Korana?" Avienda replied, raising her chin. "The argument you have with another maiden, or the feud your clan has with its enemy?" "The clan comes first, of course, but what does that matter?" "The Shanshan deserve to be fought," Avienda said, "and you are right that it pains to ask them for peace. But you forget that we have a greater enemy. Sightblinder himself has a feud with all men, and our duty is larger than feuds between nations." Amis nodded. "There will be time enough to show the Shanshan the weight of our spears at another date." Korana shook her head. "Wise One, you sound like a wetlander. What care have we for their prophecies and stories? Randalthor's duty as Karakarn is much greater than his duty to the wetlanders. He must lead us to glory." Amis stared harshly at the blonde maiden. "You speak like a Shido." Korana locked her stare for a moment, then wilted, turning away. "Pardon, Wise One," she finally said. "I have toe." But you should know that the Shanchan had Aiel in their camps. What? Avienda asked. They were leashed, Corona said, like their tame Aes Sedai. They were being shown off like prizes for our arrival, I suspect. I recognized many Shido among them. Amis hissed softly. Shido or not, Aiel being held as Damani was a grave insult, and the Shanchan were flaunting their captives. She gripped her dagger. What do you say now? Amis glanced at Avienda. Avienda gritted her teeth. The same, wise one, though I'd almost rather cut out my tongue than admit it. Amis nodded, looking back at Corana. Do not think that we will ignore this insult, Corana. Vengeance will come. Once this war is done, the Shanchan will feel the storm of our arrows and the tips of our spears, but not until after. Go tell the two clan chiefs what you have told me. Corana nodded. She would meet her Toh later, in private, with Amis, and left. Dahmer Flynn and the others had already reached the manor house. Would they wake Rand? He was sleeping now, though Avienda had been forced to mute her bond in the middle of her night's punishment, lest she endure sensations that she'd rather have avoided. At least, she'd rather have avoided them second-hand. There will be dangerous words of this among the spears, Amis said thoughtfully. There will be calls to attack, demands that the Karakarn give up his attempts to make peace. Will they stay with him when he refuses? Avienda asked. Of course they will, Amis said. They're Aiel. She glanced at Avienda. We haven't much time, child. Perhaps it is time to stop coddling you. I will think up better punishments for you starting tomorrow. Coddling me? Avienda watched Amis stalk away. They couldn't possibly come up with anything more useless or demeaning. But she'd learned long ago not to underestimate Amis. With a sigh, Avienda broke into a trot, heading back toward her tent. Chapter 16. In the White Tower. I'm curious to hear the novice speak. Tell me, Egwene Alvear, how would you have handled the situation? Egwene looked up from the bowl of shells, two-legged steel nutcracker in one hand, a bulbous walnut in the other. It was the first time any of the Aes Sedai present had addressed her. She had begun to think that attending the Three Whites would turn out to be another waste of time. The afternoon's location was a small inset balcony on the third level of the White Tower. Sitters could demand rooms with not only full windows, but balconies as well, something that was uncommon, though not unheard of, for regular sisters. This one was shaped like a small turret, with a sturdy stone wall running around the rim in a curve, a similar stone hanging from the outcropping above. There was generous space between the two, and the view was quite beautiful, eastward across the rising hills that eventually climbed to Kinslayer's dagger. The dagger itself might have been distantly visible on a clear day. A cool breeze blew across the balcony, and this high up it was fresh and unsullied by the stink of the city below. A sinuous pair of sticklesharps, with their three-pronged leaves and clinging vines, grew on each side of the balcony, their creeping tendrils covering the inside of the stonework and making it look almost like a deep forest ruin. The plants were more ornamentation than Egwene would have expected in the quarters of a white, but Farana was reported to be a shade on the vain side. She probably liked it that her balcony was so distinctive, even if protocol required her to keep the vines pruned so as not to mar the gleaming profile of the tower itself. The Three Whites sat in wicker chairs at a low table. Egwene sat before them on a wicker stool, back to the open air, denied the view as she cracked nuts for the others. Any number of servants or kitchen workers could have done the work, but this was the sort of thing that sisters found to fill the time of novices, whom they thought might be lounging about too much. Egwene had thought that cracking the walnuts was just a pretense. After being ignored for the better part of an hour, she had begun to wonder, but all three were looking at her now. She shouldn't have doubted her instincts. Farana had the coppery skin of a Damani and a temperament to match. Odd for a white. She was short, with an apple-shaped face and dark, lustrous hair. Her auburn dress was filmy but decent, with a wide white sash at the waist to match her shawl, which she was currently wearing. The dress didn't lack for embroidery, and the fabric did seem an indication, perhaps intentional, of her Damani heritage. The other two, Miyasi and Tassan, both wore white, as if they feared that dresses of any other colors were a betrayal of their Aja. That notion was becoming more and more common among all of the Aes Sedai. Tassan was a Tarabonner, with her dark hair in beaded braids. The beads were white and gold, and they framed a narrow face that looked as if it had been pinched at top and bottom and pulled. She always looked worried about something, though perhaps that was just the times. Light knew they all had a great deal to worry over. Miyasi was more calm, her head topped by iron-gray hair in a bun. Her Aes Sedai face betrayed none of the many years that she must have seen for her hair to silver so fully. She was tall and plump, and she preferred her walnuts shelled very particularly. No fragments or broken pieces of nut for her, only full halves. Egwene carefully pried one from the shell she had cracked, then handed it over. The small brown lump was wrinkled and ridged, like the brain of a tiny animal. "What was it you asked, Farana?" Egwene asked, cracking another walnut and discarding the shell in a pail at her feet. The white barely frowned at Egwene's improper response. They were all growing accustomed to the fact that this novice seldom acted her presumed station. "I asked," Farana said coolly, "what you would have done in the Amerlin's place. Consider this part of your instruction. You know that the dragon has been reborn, and you know that the tower must control him in order for the last battle to proceed. How would you handle him?" A curious question. It didn't sound much like instruction. His tone didn't make it sound like he wanted to complain about Elida, either. There was too much contempt for Egwene in that voice. The other two whites remained quiet. Farana was a sitter, and they deferred to her. "She's heard how often I mention Elida's failure with Rand," Egwene thought, looking into Farana's steely black eyes. "So, a test, is it? This would have to be handled very carefully." Egwene reached for another walnut. "First, I would send a group of sisters to his home village." Farana raised an eyebrow. "To intimidate his family?" "Of course not," Egwene said. "To interrogate them. Who is this dragon reborn? Is he a man of temper? A man of passions? Or is he a calm man, careful and cautious? Was he the type to spend time alone in the fields? Or did he make quick friends of the other youths? Would you be more likely to find him in a tavern or a workshop?" "But you already have him," Tassan said. "I do," Egwene said, cracking the walnut. "But we were speaking of a hypothetical situation. Best you remember that in the real world I know the Dragon Reborn personally, as nobody else in this tower does." "Let us assume that you are you," Farana said, "and that he is Randall Thor, your childhood friend." "Very well. Tell me," Farana said, leaning forward, "of the types of men you listed just before, which best fits this Randall Thor?" Egwene hesitated. "All of them," she said, dropping a fragmented walnut into a small bowl with others. Miyasi wouldn't touch it, but the other two weren't so picky. "If I were you and the dragon were Rand, I'd know him to be a rational person for a man, if somewhat bullheaded at times. Well, most of the time. More importantly, I'd know him to be a good man at heart. And so my next step would be to send sisters to him to offer guidance." "And if he rejected them?" Farana asked. "Then I'd send spies," Egwene said, "and watch to see if he has changed from the man I once knew." And while you waited and spied, he would terrorize the countryside, wreaking havoc and bringing armies to his banner. And is that not what we want him to do? Egwene asked. I don't believe he could have been prevented from taking Kalandor, should we have wanted him to be. He has managed to restore order to Cairhien, unite Tyr and Ilion beneath one ruler, and presumably has gained the favor of Andor as well. Not to mention subjugating those Aiel, Miyasi said, reaching for a handful of nuts. Egwene caught her with a sharp gaze. Nobody subjugates the Aiel. Rand gained their respect. I was with him at the time. Miyasi froze, hand partway to the bowl of nut meats. She shook herself, breaking Egwene's gaze, grabbing the bowl and retreating back to her chair. A cool breeze blew across the balcony, rustling the vines, which Farana had complained were not blooming this spring like they should. Egwene returned to shelling walnuts. It seems, Farana said, that you would simply let him sow chaos as he saw fit. Rand al'Thor is like a river, Egwene said. Calm and placid when not agitated, but a furious and deadly current when squeezed too tightly. What Elaida did to him was the equivalent of trying to force the Manetha Rendrella through a canyon only 2 feet wide. Waiting to discover a man's temperament is not foolish, nor is it a sign of weakness. Acting without information is lunacy, and the White Tower deserved the tempest it riled up. Perhaps, Farana said. But you have still not told me how you would deal with the situation once your information was collected and the time for waiting had passed. Farana was known for her temper, but at the moment her voice held the coldness common among whites. It was the coldness of one who spoke without emotion, thinking about logic without tolerating outside influences. It was not the best way to approach problems. People were much more complex than a set of rules or numbers. There was a time for logic, true, but there was also a time for emotion. Rand was a problem she hadn't allowed herself to dwell on. She needed to deal with one problem at a time. But there was also much to be said for planning ahead. If she didn't consider how to deal with the Dragon Reborn, she'd eventually find herself in as bad a situation as Elaida. He had changed from the man she had known, and yet the seeds of personality within him must be the same. She'd seen his rage during their months traveling together into the Aiel Waste. That hadn't often come out during his childhood, but she could see now that it must have been lurking. It wasn't that he had suddenly developed a temper. It was simply that nothing in the 2 rivers had upset him. During the months she'd traveled with him, he'd seemed to harden with each step. He was under extraordinary pressures. How did one deal with such a man? She frankly had no idea. But this conversation wasn't about what to do with Rand. Not really. It was about Farana trying to determine what kind of woman Egwene was. Rand al'Thor sees himself as an emperor, Egwene said. And I suppose he is one now. He will react poorly if he thinks he is being pushed or shoved in a particular direction. If I were to deal with him, I would send a delegation to honor him. A lavish procession? Farana asked. No, Egwene said. But not a threadbare one either. A group of 3 Aes Sedai, led by a gray, accompanied by a green and a blue. He views the blue favorably because of past associations, and greens are often perceived as the opposite to red, a subtle indication that we are willing to work with him rather than gentle him. A gray because it would be expected, but also because if a gray is sent, then it means negotiations, not armies, will follow. Good logic, Tassan said, nodding. Farana was not so easily convinced. Delegations like this one have failed in the past. I believe that Elaida's own delegation was led by a Grey. Yes, but Elaida's delegation was fundamentally flawed, Egwene said. And why is that? Why, because it was sent by a Red, of course, Egwene said, cracking a nut. I have trouble seeing the logic in raising a member of the Red Aja to Amerlin during the days of the Dragon Reborn. Doesn't that seem destined to create animosity between him and the tower? One might say, Farana countered, that a red is needed during these troubled times, for the red are the most experienced at dealing with men who can channel. Dealing with is different from working with, Egwene said. The Dragon Reborn should not have been left to run free, but since when has the White Tower been in the business of kidnapping and forcing people to our will? Are we not known as the most subtle and careful of all people? Do we not pride ourselves on being able to make others do as they should, all the while letting them think it was their idea? When in the past have we locked kings in boxes and beaten them for disobedience? Why now, of all the times under the light, have we forsaken our fine practice and become simple footpads instead? Farana selected a walnut. The other two whites were sharing an unsettled look. There is sense in what you say, the sitter finally admitted. Egwene set aside the nutcracker. Rand al'Thor is a good man in his heart, but he needs guidance. These days are when we should have been at our most subtle. He should have been led to trust Aes Sedai above all others, to rely on our counsel. He should have been shown the wisdom in listening. Instead, he has been shown that we will treat him like an unruly child. If he is one, he cannot be allowed to think we regard him in such a way. Because of our bungling, he has taken some Aes Sedai captive, and has allowed still others to be bonded to those Ashaman of his. Farana sat up stiffly. Best not to mention that atrocity. What is this? Tassan said, shocked, hand raised to her breast. Some whites never seemed to pay attention to the world around them. Farana? Did you know of this? Farana didn't respond. I've heard this rumor, said stout Miyasi. If it is true, then something must be done. Yes, Egwene said. Unfortunately, we cannot focus on al'Thor right now. He is the greatest problem facing the world, pinch-faced Tassan said, leaning forward. We must deal with him first. No, Egwene said. There are other issues. Miyasi frowned. With the last battle impending, I can't see any other issues of importance. Egwene shook her head. In dealing with Rand now, we'd be like a farmer looking at his wagon and worrying that there aren't any goods in the bed for him to sell, but ignoring the fact that his axle is cracked. Fill the bed before it is time, and you'll just break the wagon and be worse off than when you started. And what, exactly, are you implying? Tassan demanded. Egwene looked back at Farana. I see, Farana said. You are referring to the division in the White Tower. Can a cracked stone be a good foundation for a building? Egwene asked. Can a frayed rope hold a panicky horse? How can we, in our current state, hope to manage the Dragon Reborn himself? Farana said, Why then do you continue to enforce the division by insisting that you are the Amerlin seat? You defy your own logic. And renouncing my claim on the Amerlin seat would mend the tower? Egwene asked. It would help. Egwene raised an eyebrow. Let us assume for a moment that by renouncing my claim I could persuade the rebel faction to rejoin the White Tower and accept Elida's leadership. She raised the eyebrow further, indicating how likely she thought that was. Would the divisions be healed? You just said they would be, Tassan said, frowning. Oh? Egwene said. Would sisters stop scurrying through the hallways, frightened to be alone? Would groups of women from different Ajas stop regarding each other with hostility when they pass in the hallways? With all due respect, would we no longer feel the need to wear our shawls at all times to reinforce who we are and where our allegiance is? Farana glanced down briefly at her white-fringed shawl. Egwene leaned forward, continuing. Surely you, of all women in the White Tower, can see the importance of the Ajas working together. We need women with different skills and interests to gather into Ajas. But does it make sense for us to refuse to work together? The white has not caused this regrettable tension, Miyasi said with a little snort. The others, acting with such abundance of emotion, have created it. The present leadership has caused it, Egwene said. A leadership which teaches that it's all right to still fellow sisters in secret, to execute warders before their Aes Sedai are even brought to trial, that there's nothing wrong with removing a sister's shawl and reducing her to an accepted, that there's nothing wrong with disbanding an entire Aja. And what of acting without the Council of the Hall in something as dangerous as kidnapping and imprisoning the Dragon Reborn? Is it unexpected that the sisters would be so frightened and worried? Is it not all completely logical, what has happened to us? The three whites were quiet. I will not submit, Egwene said. Not while doing so leaves us fractured. I will continue to assert that Elida is not the Amerlin. Her actions have proven it. You want to help battle the Dark One? Well, your first step is not to deal with the Dragon Reborn. Your first step should be to reach out to sisters of the other Ajas. Why us? Tessan said. The actions of others are not our responsibility. And are you not to blame at all? Egwene asked, letting a little of her anger seep through. Would none of her sisters accept a modicum of responsibility? You of the white should have seen where this road would lead. Yes, Swan and the Blue were not without their flaws, but you should have seen the flaw in pulling her down, then allowing Elida to disband the Blue. Besides, I believe that several members of your own Aja were integral to the act of setting up Elida as Amerlin. Miyasi recoiled. The whites did not like to be reminded of Yaren and her failure as Elida's keeper. Instead of turning against Elida for ousting the white, they seemed to have turned against their own member for the shame she had caused them. I still think that this is work for the Greys, Tessan said, but she sounded less convinced than she had just moments before. You should speak with them. I have, Egwene said. Her patience was beginning to fray. Some will not speak with me and continue to send me to penance. Others say these rifts are not their fault, but with some coaxing have agreed to do what they can. The Yellows have been very reasonable, and I think they're beginning to see the problems in the tower as a wound to be healed. I'm still working with several Brown sisters. They seem more fascinated by the problems than worried about them. I've sent several of them looking through the histories for examples of division, hoping they'll run across the story of Renala Merlin. The connection should be easy to make, and perhaps they will begin to see that our problems here can be solved. The Greens have, ironically, been the most stubborn. They can be very like Reds in many ways, which is infuriating, as they really should be willing to accept me as one who would have been among them. That only leaves the Blue, who have been banished, and the Red. I doubt that sisters of that last Aja are going to be very receptive to my suggestions. Farana sat back, thoughtful, and Tessan sat with 3 forgotten walnuts in her hand, staring at Egwene. Miyasi scratched at her iron-gray hair, eyes wide with surprise. Had Egwene given away too much? Aes Sedai were remarkably like Randall Thor. They did not like to know when they were being maneuvered. You are shocked, she said. What? Do you think I should simply sit, like most, and do nothing while the tower crumbles? This white dress has been forced upon me, and I do not accept what it represents, but I will use it. A woman in novice white is one of the few who can pass from one Aja quarter to another these days. Someone has to work to mend the tower, and I am the best choice. Besides, it is my duty. How very reasonable of you, Farana said, her ageless brow furrowed. Thank you, Egwene said. Were they worried that she'd overstepped her bounds? Angered that she'd been manipulating Aes Sedai? Coldly determined to see her punished yet again? Farana leaned forward. Let us say that we wished to work toward mending the tower. What path would you recommend? Egwene felt a surge of excitement. She'd had nothing but setbacks during the last few days. Idiot Greens. They would feel foolish indeed once she was accepted as Amerlin. Suana of the Yellow Aja will soon be inviting you three to share a meal with her, Egwene said. At least Suana would make the offer once Egwene prodded her. Accept and take your meal in a public place, perhaps in one of the tower gardens. Be seen enjoying one another's company. I will try to get a brown sister to invite you next. Let yourself be seen by the other sisters mixing among the Ajas. Simple enough, Miasi said. Very little effort required, but excellent potential for gain. We shall see, Farana said. You may withdraw, Egwene. She didn't like being dismissed so, but there was no helping it. Still, the woman had shown Egwene respect by using her name. Egwene stood up and very carefully nodded her head to Farana. Though Tassan and Kiraki gave no strong reactions, her eyes widened slightly. By now it was well known in the tower that Egwene never curtsied. And shockingly, Farana bowed her head just a degree, returning the gesture. Should you decide to choose the white, here, the woman said, know that you will find a welcome here. Your logic this day was remarkable for one so young. Egwene hid a smile. Just 4 days back, Ben Ainalsad offered Egwene a place in the brown, and Egwene was still surprised at how vigilantly Suana recommended the yellow to her. Almost they made her change her mind, but that was mostly her frustration with the green at the moment. Thank you, she said. But you must remember that the Amerlin must represent all Ajas. Our discussion was enjoyable, however. I hope that you will allow me to join you again in the future. With that, Egwene withdrew, letting herself smile broadly as she nodded to Farana's sturdy, bow-legged warder standing guard just inside the balcony. Her smile lasted right up until she left the white sector of the tower and found Katarine waiting in the hallway. The red was not one of the two assigned to Egwene earlier in the day, and talk about the tower said that Elida was relying on Katarine more and more now that her keeper had vanished on a mysterious mission. Katarine's sharp face bore a smile of its own. That was not a good sign. Here, the woman said, offering a wooden cup, holding a clear liquid. It was time for Egwene's afternoon dose of forkroot. Egwene grimaced, but took the cup and drank the contents. She wiped her mouth with her handkerchief, then began to walk down the hallway. And where are you going? Katarine asked. The smugness in her tone made Egwene hesitate. Egwene turned, frowning. My next lesson. You will have no further lessons, Katarine said. At least, not of the kind you have been receiving. All agree that your skill with weaves is impressive for a novice. Egwene frowned. Were they going to raise her to accept it again? She doubted that Elida would allow her any more freedom, and she rarely spent any time in her quarters, so the extra space would be unimportant. No, Katarine said, toying idly with the fringe on her shawl. What you need to learn, it has been decided, is humility. The Amerlin has heard of your foolish refusal to curtsy to sisters. In her opinion, it's the last symbol of your defiant nature, and so you are to receive a new form of instruction. Egwene felt a moment of fear. What kind of instruction? She said, keeping her voice even. Chores and work, Katarine said. I already do chores just like the novices. You mistake me, Katarine said. From now on, all you will do is chores. You are to report to the kitchens immediately. You will spend every afternoon working there. In the evenings, you will scrub floors. In the mornings, you will report to the grounds master and work in the gardens. This will be your life, those same 3 activities every day, 5 hours of each one, until you give up your foolish pride and learn to curtsy to your betters. It was an end to Egwene's freedom, what little she had. There was glee in Katarine's eyes. Ah, so you understand, Katarine said. No more visiting sisters in their quarters, wasting their time as you practice weaves that you have already mastered. No more laziness. Now you will work instead. What think you of that? It wasn't the difficulty of the work that worried Egwene. She didn't mind the chores she did each day. It was the lack of contact with other sisters that would ruin her. How would she mend the White Tower? Light! It was a disaster. She gritted her teeth and forced down her emotion. She met Katarine's eyes, saying, "Very well, let us go." Katarine blinked. She'd obviously expected a tantrum, or at least a fight. But this was not the time. Egwene turned her step toward the kitchens, leaving the quarters of the Whites behind. She couldn't let them know how effective this punishment was. She forced down her panic as she walked, the cavernous hallways of the inner tower lined with bracketed lamps, long and sinuous, like the heads of serpents spouting tiny flames up toward the stone ceiling. She could deal with this. She would deal with this. They would not break her. Perhaps she should work for a few days, then pretend that she had been humbled. Should she give the curtsy Elida demanded? It was a simple thing, really. One curtsy and she could go back to her more important duties. No, she thought. No, that would not be the end of it. I'd lose the moment I gave that first curtsy. Giving in would prove to Elida that Egwene could be broken. Curtsying would begin a descent into destruction. Soon, Elida would decide that Egwene needed to start using honorifics for the Aes Sedai. The false Amerlin would send Egwene back to work detail, knowing it had been effective before. Would Egwene bend there, too? How long before any credibility she had ended up forgotten, trampled into the tiles of the tower hallways? She could not bend. The beatings had not changed her behavior. Work detail must not change her either. 3 hours of working in the kitchens did little to improve her mood. Laris, the hefty mistress of kitchens, had set Egwene at scrubbing out one of the oven-like fireplaces. It was dirty, grimy work, not conducive to thinking. Not that there were many ways out of her situation. Egwene knelt back on her heels, raising an arm and wiping her brow. The arm came away smeared with soot. Egwene sighed softly, her mouth and nose protected by a damp cloth to keep her from breathing too much ash. Her breath was hot and stuffy against her face, and her skin was sticky with sweat. The drops that fell from her face were stained with black soot. Through the cloth she could smell the dull, crusty scent of ash that had been burned over and over and over again. The fireplace was a large, square construction of burned red bricks. It was open on both sides, and more than large enough to crawl into, which was exactly what Egwene had to do. Dark crusts built up on the inside of the flue and chimney, and they needed to be scrubbed free lest they clog the chimney or break free and fall into the food. Outside in the dining room, Egwene could hear Katarine and Lyrene chatting and laughing with each other. The Reds periodically poked heads in to check on her, but her real supervisor was Laris, who was scrubbing pots on the other side of the room. Egwene had changed into a work dress for the duty. While it had once been white, it had been repeatedly used by novices cleaning the fireplaces, and the soot had been ground into the fibers. Patches of gray stained the cloth, like shadows. She rubbed the small of her back, got back on her hands and knees, and crawled farther into the fireplace. Using a small wooden scrape, she worked clumps of ash free from seams between the bricks, then gathered it up and deposited it in brass buckets, the rims of which were powdered white and gray with ash. Her first task had been to dig out all of the loose soot and pile it into the buckets. Her hands were so blackened from the work, she worried that the most furious scrubbing wouldn't get them clean. Her knees ached, and they seemed a strange counterpart to her backside, which still stung from her regular morning beating. She continued, scratching with her scrape at a blackened section of brick, dimly lit by the lantern she'd left burning in a corner inside the fireplace. She itched to use the one power, But the Reds outside would sense her channeling, and she'd discovered that her afternoon dose of fork root had been uncharacteristically strong, leaving her unable to channel as much as a trickle. In fact, it had been strong enough to leave her drowsy, which made the work even harder. Was this to be her life? Trapped inside a fireplace, scrubbing at bricks nobody saw, locked away from the world? She couldn't stand up to Elida if everyone forgot about her. She coughed quietly, the sound echoing against the inside of the fireplace. She needed a plan. Her only recourse seemed to be to use the sisters who were trying to root out the Black Aja. But how to visit them? Without being trained by sisters, she had no way to escape her Red handlers by entering the domains of other Ajas. Could she sneak away somehow while doing labor? If her absence were discovered, she'd probably end up in an even worse situation. But she couldn't let her life be dominated by this menial labor. The last battle was approaching. The Dragon Reborn ran free, and the Amerlin's seat was on her hands and knees cleaning fireplaces. She gritted her teeth, scrubbing furiously. The soot had been baked on for so long that it formed a glossy black patina on the stone. She'd never get it all off. She just needed to make sure it was clean enough that none would break free. Reflected in that glossy patina, she saw a shadow move across the opening of the far side of the fireplace. Egwene immediately reached for the source, but of course she found nothing, not with forkroot clouding her mind. But there was definitely someone outside the fireplace, crouching down, moving quietly. Egwene gripped the scrape in one hand, slowly reaching down with the other to grab the brush she'd been using to scoop out ash. Then she spun. Laris froze, peeking into the fireplace. The mistress of kitchens wore a large white apron, stained with a few soot marks itself. Her pudgy round face had seen its share of winters. Her hair was starting to gray, and lines creased the sides of her eyes. Leaning over as she was, her jowls formed a second, third, and fourth chin, and she gripped the side of the fireplace opening with a thick-fingered hand. Egwene relaxed. Why had she been so certain that someone had been sneaking up on her? It was just Laris coming to check on her. Yet why had the woman moved so silently? Laris glanced to the side, eyes narrowing. Then she raised a finger to her lips. Egwene felt herself tense again. What was going on? Laris backed out of the fireplace, waiting for Egwene to follow. The mistress of kitchens moved on light feet, far quieter than Egwene would have thought possible. Assistant cooks and scullions clanged away in other parts of the kitchen, but none were directly visible. Egwene crept free of the fireplace, tucking the scrape into her belt and wiping her hands on her dress. She pulled the cloth free from her face, breathing sweet, soot-free air. She took a deep breath and received a harsh glare from Laris, followed by another finger to the lips. Egwene nodded, following Laris through the kitchens. In a few moments, she and Egwene stood in a pantry, thick with the scent of dried grains and aging cheeses. The tiles gave way to more durable brickwork here. Laris shoved aside a few sacks, then pulled open a piece of the floor. It was a wooden trapdoor, capped with shaved brickwork on the top to make it seem part of the floor. It revealed a small rock-walled chamber underneath the pantry, large enough to hold a person, though a tall man would be cramped. "You wait here until night," Laris said in a low voice. "I can't get you out right now, not with the tower fluttery as a yard full of hens when the fox is about. But the garbage goes out late at night, and I'll hide you among the girls who unload it. A dock worker will take you to a small boat and row you across the river. I have some friends among the guard. They'll turn the other way. Once you reach the other side, it's up to you what you do. I'd advise against going back to those fools who made you their puppet. Find some place to lie low until this all blows over. Then come back and see if whoever's in charge will take you in. Isn't likely it will be Elida the way things are going." Egwene blinked in surprise. "Well," the heavy-set woman said, "in you go." I No time for jabbering, Laura said, as if she weren't the one doing all of the talking. She was obviously nervous, the way she kept glancing about and tapping her foot. But she'd obviously also done this sort of thing before. Why was the simple cook in the White Tower so skilled at sneaking? So handy with a plan to get Egwene out of the fortified and besieged city? And why did she have a bolt hole in the kitchens in the first place? Light! How had she created it? Don't worry about me, Laura said, eyeing Egwene. I can handle myself. I'll keep all of the kitchen servants away from where you were working. Those Aes Sedai only check on you every half hour or so. And since they just checked a minute ago, it will be a while before they look in again. When they do check, I can plead ignorance, and everyone will assume you slipped out of the kitchens. We'll soon have you out of the city, and nobody will be the wiser. Yes, Egwene said, finally finding her tongue. But why? She had assumed that after helping Min and Swan, Laras wouldn't be eager to help another fugitive. Laras looked back at her. In the woman's eyes, a determination as hard as any Aes Sedai's. Egwene certainly had overlooked this woman. Who was she, really? I won't be a party to the breaking of a girl's spirit, Laras said sternly. Those beatings are shameful. Fool Aes Sedai. I've served loyally these years, I have, but now they've told me that you're to be worked as hard as I can push you indefinitely. Well, I can see when a girl has moved away from being instructed and into being beaten down. I won't have it. Not in my kitchens. Like Bernalida for thinking she could do such a thing. Execute you or make you a novice, I don't care, but this breaking is unacceptable. The woman stood, setting hands on hips, a puff of flour rising from her apron. Oddly, Egwene found herself considering the offer. She'd denied Swan's offer to save her, but if she fled now, she would return to the rebel camp, having freed herself. That would be far superior to being rescued. She could get away from all this, away from the beatings, away from the drudgery. To do what? To sit on the outside and watch the tower collapse? No, she said to Laras. Your offer is very kind, but I can't take it. I'm sorry. Laras frowned. Now you listen, Laras, Egwene interrupted. One does not take that tone with an Aes Sedai, no matter that one is the mistress of kitchens. Laras hesitated. Fool girl. You ain't Aes Sedai. Accept it, or not. I still can't go. Unless you intend to try stuffing me into that hole yourself, gagging and tying me to keep me from crying out, followed by escorting me across the river in person, then I suggest letting me return to my work. But why? Because, Egwene said, glancing back at the fireplace, someone has to fight her. You can't fight like this, Laras said. Each day is a battle, Egwene said. Each day I refuse to bend means something. Even if Elida and her Reds are the only ones who know it, that's something. A small something, but more than I could do from the outside. Come, I've still got 2 hours of work left. She turned and began to walk back toward the fireplace. A reluctant Laras closed the hatch on her hidden chamber, then joined her. The woman made much more noise now as she walked, brushing against counters, her footfalls sounding on the bricks. Curious how she'd been able to be so quiet when she wanted to. A flash of red cloth, like the blood of a dead rabbit in the snow, moved through the kitchens. Egwene froze as Katarine, wearing a dress with crimson skirts and yellow trim, spotted her. The Red's mouth was thin-lipped, her eyes narrow. Had she seen Egwene and Laras walk off? Laras froze. I see now what I was doing wrong, Egwene quickly said to the mistress of kitchens, eyeing a second hearth, which lay near where they had been standing in the pantry. Thank you for showing it to me. I'll be more careful now. See that you are, Laras said, shaking out of her shock. Otherwise you'll see what a real punishment is like, not those half-hearted paddlings the mistress of novices gives. Now back to work with you. Egwene nodded, hurrying back toward the fireplace. Katarine held up a hand to forestall her. Egwene's heart thumped traitorously. "No need," Katarine said. "The Amerlin has demanded that the novice attend her tonight at dinner. I told the Amerlin that one day of work would hardly break someone as foolishly stubborn as this child, but she is insistent. I guess you are to be given your first chance to prove your humility, child. I suggest you take it." Egwene glanced down at her blackened hands and soiled dress. "Go, run," Katarine said. "Wash up and clean yourself. The Amerlin will not be kept waiting." Washing up proved to be nearly as difficult as cleaning the fireplace. The soot had stained her hands much in the way it had the work dress. Egwene spent the better part of an hour washing in a tub full of lukewarm water, trying to make herself presentable. Her fingernails were ragged from scraping the bricks, and it seemed that each time she rinsed her hair, she washed out an entire bucket's worth of soot flakes. However, she was glad for the chance. She rarely had much time for bathing. Usually she could not stop for more than a quick scrub. As she rinsed and scrubbed in the small, gray-tiled bathing chamber, she considered her next step. She had turned down the opportunity to flee. That meant she had to work with Elida and her Reds, the only sisters she saw. But could they be made to see their errors? She wished she could send the whole lot of them for penance and be rid of them. But no. She was Amerlin. She represented all Ajas, including the Red. She couldn't treat them as Elida had treated the Blues. They were the most antagonistic toward her, but that meant a greater challenge. She seemed to be making some headway with Sylviana, and hadn't Lyrene Dwarelin admitted that Elida had made serious mistakes? Maybe the Reds weren't the only ones she could influence. There were always chance meetings with other sisters in the hallways. If one of them approached her to speak, the Reds couldn't very well tow her away. They would show some decorum, and that would give Egwene a chance to interact a bit with other sisters. But how to treat Elida herself? Was it wise to let the false Amerlin continue to think that Egwene was nearly cowed? Or was it time to make a stand? By the end of her bath, Egwene felt a great deal cleaner and a great deal more confident. Her war had taken a serious turn for the worse, but she could still fight. She ran a hurried brush through her wet hair, threw on a new novice dress. My, how good it felt to have the soft, clean fabric on her skin, and left to join her handlers. They escorted her up to the Amerlin's chambers. Egwene passed several groups of sisters, and she held herself carefully erect for their benefit. The handlers took her through the red sector of the tower, the tiles on the floor shifting to a pattern of red and charcoal. There were more people walking about here, women in their shawls, servants bearing the flame of Tarvalin on their chests. Never any warders. That always felt strange to Egwene, since they were so common in other parts of the tower. A long climb and a few twists later, they arrived at Elida's quarters. Egwene checked her skirts unconsciously. She had determined during the walk that she needed to approach Elida with silence, just as she had last time. Riling her further would only lead to more restrictions. Egwene would not debase herself, but neither would she go out of her way to insult Elida. Let the woman think as she wished. A servant opened the door, leading Egwene in and into the dining chamber. There she was shocked by what she found. She had assumed she'd attend Elida alone, or maybe with Maidani. Egwene hadn't for a moment considered that the dining room would be filled with women. There were 5, one from each Aja, save the red and the blue, and each woman was a sitter. Yukiri was there, as was Doacine, both from the clandestine hunters of the Black Aja. Firana was there, though she seemed surprised to see Egwene. Had the White not known about this dinner earlier, or had she simply not mentioned it? Rubinda of the Green Aja sat beside Siobhan of the Brown, a sister whom Egwene had been wanting to meet. Siobhan was one of those who supported negotiating with the rebel Aes Sedai, and Egwene hoped to be able to nudge her more toward helping unify the power from within. There wasn't a red sister at the table, other than Elida. Was that because the red sitters were all out of the tower? Perhaps Elida thought the room balanced with her there, as she still thought of herself as red, although she wasn't supposed to. It was a long table, crystal goblets sparkling and reflecting light from the ornate bronze stand lamps running along the walls painted a rusty red-yellow in color. Each woman wore a fine gown in the color of her aja. The room smelled of succulent meats and steamed carrots. The women chatted, amicable, but forced, tense. They didn't want to be there. Across the room, Doacine nodded to Egwene, almost in respect. It was an indication of something. I'm here because you said that this sort of thing was important, it seemed to say. Elida sat at the head of the table, wearing a red dress with full sleeves, uncut garnets trimming them and the bodice, her face bearing a satisfied smile. Servants bustled back and forth, pouring wine and bringing food. Why had Elida called a dinner of sitters? Was this an attempt to heal the rifts in the White Tower? Had Egwene misjudged her? Ah, good, Elida said, noticing Egwene. You've finally arrived. Come here, child. Egwene did so, walking through the room, the last few sitters catching notice of her. Some seemed confused, others made curious by her presence. As she walked, Egwene realized something. This one evening could easily undo all that she'd worked for. If the Aes Sedai here saw her subserviently waiting on Elida, Egwene would lose integrity in their eyes. Elida had declared that Egwene was cowed, but Egwene had proven otherwise. If she bent to Elida's will here, even a little, it would be seen as proof. Light burn the woman. Why had she invited so many of the women that Egwene had been working to influence? Was it simple happenstance? Egwene joined the false Amerlin at the head of the table, and a servant handed her a crystal pitcher of glistening red wine. You are to keep my cup full, Elida said. Wait there, but don't come too close. I'd rather not have to smell the soot on you from your punishments this afternoon. Egwene clenched her jaw. Smell the soot after an hour of scrubbing? Doubtful. From the side, she could see the satisfaction in Elida's eyes as she sipped her wine. Then Elida turned to Siobhan, who sat in the chair to Elida's right. The brown was a lanky woman, with knobbed arms and an angular face, like a person made of gnarled sticks. Her eyes were thoughtful as she studied her hostess. Tell me, Siobhan, Elida said, do you still insist on those foolish talks with the rebels? Siobhan responded, the sisters must be given a chance to reconcile. They've had their chance, Elida said. Honestly, I expected more of a brown. You're behaving doggedly without a whit of understanding how the real world works. Why, even Maidani agrees with me, and she's a gray. You know how they are. Siobhan turned away, seeming more disturbed than before. Why did Elida invite them to dinner, if only to insult them and their Ajahs? As Egwene watched, the red turned her attention to Farana and complained to her about Rubinda, a sitter from the green who also resisted Elida's efforts to end the talks. As she spoke, she raised her cup to Egwene, tapping it. Elida had barely taken a few sips. Egwene ground her teeth, filling the cup. The others had seen her do labor before. Why, she'd cracked walnuts for Farana. This wouldn't ruin her reputation, not unless Elida forced her to abase herself somehow. But what was the point of this dinner? Elida didn't seem to be making any attempt to bring the Ajahs together. If anything, she was prying those rifts wider, the way she was dismissing those who disagreed with her. Occasionally, she would have Egwene refill her cup, but it never had room for more than a sip or two. Slowly, Egwene began to understand. This dinner wasn't about working with the Ajahs. It was about bullying the sitters into doing as Elida felt they should. and Egwene was simply there to be shown off. This was all about proving to the others how much power Elida had. She could take someone that others had named Amerlin, put a novice dress on her, and send her to penance every day. Egwene felt herself grow angry again. Why could Elida always stir her emotions? Soup bowls were removed, and plates of steamed, buttered carrots were brought, a hint of cinnamon striking the air. Egwene had not been given dinner, but she felt too sick to care about eating. No, she thought, steeling herself. I will not end this early like last time. I will endure. I am stronger than Elida. I'm stronger than her madness. The conversation continued, Elida making insulting comments to the others, sometimes with intent, sometimes with apparent unawareness. The others steered the talk away from the rebels and toward the strange and overcast skies. Eventually, Siobhan mentioned a rumor about the Shanchan working with Aiel far to the south. The Shanchan again, Elida said with a sigh. You needn't worry about them. My sources say otherwise, Mother, Siobhan said stiffly. I think we need to pay close attention to what they are doing. I have had some sisters ask this child about her experience with them, which has been extensive. You should hear the things they do to Aes Sedai. Elida laughed, a tinkling, melodic laugh. Surely you know how the child is prone to exaggeration. She glanced at Egwene. Have you been spreading lies for your friend, the fool Althor? What did he tell you to say about these invaders? They are working for him, are they not? Egwene didn't respond. Speak, Elida said, gesturing with her cup. Tell these women you have been speaking lies. Confess or I'll have you in penance again, girl. The penance she would take for not speaking would be better than suffering Elida's rage at contradicting her. Silence was the path to victory. And yet, as Egwene glanced down the long mahogany table, set with bright white seafolk porcelain and flickering red candles, she saw 5 pairs of eyes studying her. She could see their questions. Egwene had spoken boldly to them when alone, but would she hold to her assertions now, faced by the most powerful woman in the world? A woman who held Egwene's life in her hands. Was Egwene the Amerlin? Or was she just a girl who liked to pretend? Light burn you, Elida, she thought, gritting her teeth, seeing that she had been wrong. Silence wouldn't lead to victory, not in front of these women. You are not going to like how this proceeds. The Shanchan are not working for Rand, Egwene said, and they are a severe danger to the White Tower. I have spread no lies. To say otherwise would be to betray the 3 oaths. You haven't taken the 3 oaths, Elida said sternly, turning toward her. I have, Egwene said. I've held no oath rod, but it isn't the rod that makes my words true. I have spoken the words of the oaths in my heart, and to me they are more dear, for I have nothing forcing me to hold to them. And by that oath holding me, I tell you again, I am a dreamer, and I have dreamed that the Shanchan will attack the White Tower. Elida's eyes flared for a moment, and she gripped her fork until her knuckles whitened. Egwene held her eyes, and finally Elida laughed again. Ah, stubborn as ever, I see. I shall have to tell Katarine that she was right. You'll have penance for your exaggerations, child. These women know I don't speak lies, Egwene said calmly, and each time you insist that I do, you lower yourself in their eyes. Even if you disbelieve my dream, you must admit that the Shanchan are a threat. They leash women who can channel, using them as weapons with a kind of twisted terangrial. I have felt the collar on my neck. I still feel it sometimes. In my dreams, my nightmares. The room fell still. You are a foolish child, Elida said, obviously trying to pretend that Egwene was no threat. She should have turned to look at the eyes of the others. If she had, she'd have seen the truth. Well, you have forced my hand. You will kneel before me, child, and beg forgiveness. Right now. Otherwise I will lock you away alone. Is that what you want? Don't think that the beatings will stop, however. You'll still get your daily penance. You'll just be thrown back into your cell after each one. Now kneel and beg forgiveness." The sitters glanced at one another. There was no backing down now. Egwene wished it hadn't come to this, but it had, and Elida had demanded a fight. It was time to give her one. "And if I do not bow before you?" Egwene asked, meeting the woman's eyes. "What then?" "You will kneel one way or another," Elida growled, embracing the source. "You'll use the power on me?" Egwene asked calmly. "Do you have to resort to that? Have you no authority without channeling?" Elida paused. "It is within my rights to discipline one who isn't showing proper respect." "And so you will make me obey," Egwene said. "Is this what you will do to everyone in the tower, Elida? Anaja opposes you, and it is disbanded. Someone displeases you, and you destroy her right to be Aes Sedai. You will have every sister bowing down before you by the end of this." "Nonsense." "Oh?" Egwene asked. "And have you told them about your idea for a new oath? Sworn on the oath rod by every sister? An oath to obey the Amerlin and support her?" "I deny it," Egwene said. "Deny that you made the statement. Will the oaths let you?" Elida froze. If she were black, she could deny it, oath rod or not. But either way, Maidani could substantiate what Egwene had said. "It was idle talk," Elida said. "Just speculation. Thoughts spoken out loud." "There is often truth in speculation," Egwene said. "You locked the Dragon Reborn himself in a box. You just threatened to do the same to me in front of all these witnesses. People call him a tyrant, but you are the one destroying our laws and ruling by fear." Elida's eyes opened wide, her anger visible. She seemed shocked, as if she couldn't understand how she'd gone from disciplining an unruly novice into debating an equal. Egwene saw the woman begin to weave a thread of air. That had to be stopped. A gag of air would end this debate. "Go ahead," Egwene said calmly. "Use the power to silence me. As Amerlin, shouldn't you be able to talk an opponent into obedience, rather than resorting to force?" Out of the corner of her eye, Egwene saw diminutive Yukiri of the Grey nod at that comment. Elida's eyes flared in anger as she dropped the thread of air. "I don't need to rebut a mere novice," Elida snapped. "The Amerlin doesn't explain herself to one such as you." "The Amerlin understands the most complex of creeds and debates," Egwene said, quoting from memory. "Yet in the end she is the servant of all, even the lowest of laborers." That had been said by Baladare Arundyla, the first Amerlin to be raised from the brown Aja. She'd used the words in her last writings before her death. Those writings had been an explanation of her reign and what she had done during the Kavarthan Wars. Arundyla had felt that once a crisis was past, it was the moral duty of an Amerlin to explain herself to the common people. Sitting beside Elida, Siobhan nodded appreciatively. The quote was somewhat obscure. Egwene blessed Swan's quiet training in the wisdom of the former Amerlins. Much of what she'd said had come from the secret histories, but there had been a number of nuggets from women such as Baladare as well. "What is this nonsense you're sputtering?" Elida spat. "What did you intend to do with Rand al'Thor once you captured him?" Egwene said, ignoring the comment. You're not answering me," Egwene said, nodding to the table of women. "But them. Have you explained yourself, Elida? What were your plans? Or will you dodge this question just as you have the others I've asked?" Elida's face was turning red, but she calmed herself with some effort. "I would have kept him secure and well shielded, here in the tower, until it was time for the last battle. That would have prevented him from causing the suffering and chaos he's created in many nations. It was worth the risk of angering him. As the plough breaks the earth, shall he break the lives of men, and all that was shall be consumed in the fire of his eyes, Egwene said. The trumpets of war shall sound at his footsteps, the ravens feed at his voice, and he shall wear a crown of swords. Elida frowned, taken aback. The Caraithan cycle, Elida, Egwene said. When you had Rand locked away to be kept secure, had he yet taken Ilion? Had he yet worn what he was to name the crown of swords? Well, no. And how did you expect him to fulfill the prophecies if he was hidden away in the White Tower? Egwene said. How was he to cause war as the prophecies say he must? How was he to break the nations and bind them to him? How could he slay his people with the sword of peace, or bind the 9 moons to serve him if he was locked away? Do the prophecies say that he will be unfettered? Do they not speak of the chaos of his passing? How can anything pass at all if he is kept in chains? Your logic is astounding, Elida, Egwene said coldly. At that, Varana smiled slyly. She was probably thinking yet again that Egwene would fit well in the White Aja. Bah, Elida said. You ask meaningless questions. The prophecies would have to have been fulfilled. There was no other way. So you're saying that your attempt to bind him was destined to fail? No, not at all, Elida said, red-faced again. We shouldn't be bothering with this. It's not for you to decide upon. No, we should be talking about your rebels and what they've done to the White Tower. A good turn of the conversation, an attempt to put Egwene on the defensive. Elida wasn't completely incompetent, just arrogant. I see them trying to heal the rift between us, Egwene said. We cannot change what has happened. We can't change what you did to Swan, even if those with me did discover a method of healing her stilling. We can only move forward and try our best to smooth the scars. What are you doing, Elida? Refusing talks? Trying to bully the sitters into withdrawing? Insulting Ajas that are not your own? Doacine of the Yellow gave a quiet murmur of agreement. That drew Elida's eyes, and she fell silent for a moment, as if realizing that she had lost control of the debate. Enough of this. Coward, Egwene said. Elida's eyes flared wide. How dare you? I dare the truth, Elida, Egwene said quietly. You are a coward and a tyrant. I'd name you Dark Friend as well, but I suspect that the Dark One would perhaps be embarrassed to associate with you. Elida screeched, weaving in a flash of power, slamming Egwene back against the wall, toppling the pitcher of wine from her hands. It shattered on a patch of wooden floor beside the rug, throwing a spray of blood-like liquid across the table and half of its occupants, staining the white tablecloth with a smear of red. You name me Dark Friend? Elida screamed. You are the Dark Friend. You and those rebels outside who seek to distract me from doing what must be done. A blast of woven air slammed Egwene against the wall again, and she dropped to the ground, hitting shards of the broken pitcher that sliced open her arms. A dozen switches beat her, ripping her clothing. Blood seeped from her arms, and it began to splash into the air, smirching the wall as Elida beat her. Elida, stop it, Rupinda said, standing, green dress swishing. Are you mad? Elida turned, panting. Do not tempt me, Green. The switches continued to beat Egwene. She bore it silently. With effort, she stood up. She could feel her face and arms swelling already, but she maintained a calm gaze at Elida. Elida, Ferrana yelled, standing. You violate Tower law. You cannot use the power to punish an initiate. I am Tower law, Elida raved. She pointed at the sisters. You mock me. I know you do it, behind my back. You show me deference when you see me, but I know what you say, what you whisper. You ungrateful fools. After what I've done for you, do you think I'll suffer you forever? Take this one as an example. She spun, pointing at Egwene, then stumbled back in shock to find Egwene calmly watching her. Elida gasped softly, raising a hand to her breast as the switches beat. They could all see the weaves, and they could all see that Egwene did not scream, although her mouth was not gagged with air. Her arms dripped blood, her body was beaten before them, and yet she found no reason to scream. Instead, she quietly blessed the Aiel wise ones for their wisdom. "And what?" Egwene said evenly. "Am I to be an example of, Elida?" The beating continued. Oh, how it hurt! Tears formed in the corners of Egwene's eyes, but she had felt worse, far worse. She felt it each time she thought of what this woman was doing to the institution she loved. Her true pain was not from the wounds, but from how Elida had acted before the sitters. "By the light," Rubinda whispered. "I wish I weren't needed here, Elida," Egwene said softly. "I wish that the tower had a grand Amerlin in you. I wish I could step down and accept your rule. I wish you deserved it. I would willingly accept execution if it would mean leaving a competent Amerlin. The White Tower is more important than I am. Can you say the same?" "You want execution?" Elida bellowed, recovering her tongue. "Well, you shall not have it. Death is too good for you, dark friend. I shall see you beaten. Everyone shall see you beaten until I am through with you. Only then will you die." She turned to the servants who stood gaping at the sides of the room. "Send for soldiers. I want this one cast into the deepest cell this tower can provide. Let it be voiced through the city that Egwene Alvear is a dark friend who has rejected the Amerlin's grace." Servants ran to do as she demanded. The switches continued to beat, but Egwene was growing numb. She closed her eyes, feeling faint. She had lost much blood from her left arm, which bore the deepest of her gashes. It had come to a head, as she'd feared that it would. She had cast her lot. But she didn't fear for her life. Instead, she feared for the White Tower. As she leaned back against the wall, thoughts fading, she was overcome with sorrow. Her battle from within the tower was at an end, one way or another. Chapter 17. Questions of Control. "You should be more careful," Serene said from inside the room. "The Amerlin's seat. We have much influence with her." Chapter 17.
Alrighty, I'm gonna call into this live for tonight. Well, I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Till next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe.